All right. Thank you for joining the Calm Waves podcast here today. I'm joined by Nate Roy. He's a current student at McGill University.
Yes, right.
Up in Canada. So Nate, it's kind of interesting the story of how we got to know each other is he actually DM'd Calm Waves on Instagram and was like, hey, let's, collaborate together. Let's do something. And I was like, all right, let's go. So as we kind of gotten to know each other a little bit more, we see that we're kind of on similar paths when it comes to helping people with their brain through either the mental side of things or the brain side of things or on, technology side of things. So, well, thanks for being here today. I would love to just kind of get to know you a little bit more and just kind of share your story.
Yeah, thank you so much for the invite. Really excited for the discussion.
Yeah, go ahead and dive into a little bit like origin stories, how you got to where you are, and what you're working on.
Sure. So this might be a longer story. I think it traces all the way back. I very much credit my entry into neuroscience. I credit my history in sports for this because it started as a pursuit to sort of equip myself to find the successes on the field as a football player that I had always dreamed of. And it started, when I was super young, I was really into lifting. I was one of those guys that was like, if I just get stronger, I'll be the best football player. And I did get stronger. I was a competitive power lifter and had some state records and everything in the state of Pennsylvania, but yet I was still not this player who I envisioned that I should be based on these weight room numbers. And so I think my first transition was realizing that in terms of sports performance, it's not about absolute strength. A lot of it's about your sort of neural capacity and your ability to contract your musculature rapidly and with force. So that was the first transition was, hey, I need to be training my nervous system to produce these signals to the muscles in a faster manner such that I can display this strength on the field, because it's very different, of course, when you're under a 400-pound squat bar and it takes you 6 seconds to get up to the top. So that was the first transition, but it was almost like I learned the same lesson again, because then all of a sudden my focus was 40-yard dash and vertical jump and all these things that are still very much the focus at the highest levels of sports. Every NCAA program obsesses over these numbers for recruitment. And then when you start looking at playing and competing professionally, it's the same thing. They have the NFL Combine, of course, and the same for all other sports. It's very metric based. Yet once I had kind of transitioned my training to be good at these things, like it did produce some results. I was really killing these tests and it helped with my recruitment and everything, but I still felt like there was a missing piece where it was like, okay, now I'm not only one of the strongest, but now I'm one of the fastest too and most explosive, but there's still something there that I'm not quite capturing in my training. And sort of simultaneously with this, I had begun to follow the sort of research path within academia and had some great mentors within neuroscience. And it kind of clicked for me that this was the missing piece. It was the brain. It was, how much information can the brain process? How quickly can it process this information? And how sort of malleable can the brain be to a given context? Because of course, any sport is sort of a task of modifying cognition to fit the demands of your surroundings and doing so rapidly and in unpredictable circumstances. So I would say that was sort of the second lesson for me and what put me here. You mentioned I reached out on Instagram. It feels like it's been a search for as much knowledge as I can possibly gather. And as I'm sure you can probably relate to, in this space, we're few and far between. So it felt like, I was trying to do this and help other people in doing this with younger athletes, of course, within Cortex Flex. And it's like, you don't find a lot of like-minded people who are pursuing this in the same way. So to echo what you said, really, really excited that we connected and super, super excited for our discussion as well.
So you talk about, your peak physical performance, so 40-yard dashes, all those stuff, things. Where did you feel like you were missing? Like when you said you're missing stuff, is it more like reaction time stuff? Was it processing? I mean, I think, if you have those athletes that are just beasts in the weight room, but when they get into a game or pressure situation, they just crumble, or they don't perform as well as they do in the weight room. So where did you see your lack of skill set?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there in multiple ways, because I think it's two-sided is what I kind of picked up on, at least for myself. The first being sort of that reaction time category and taking in information and reacting to it very, very quickly. One example I can give is, again, I was very, very focused on getting faster because in high school, I was not told I wasn't fast enough and things like this. So I made the 40-yard dash my obsession and got my fastest 40 in college was a 4.47, which is for a safety, it's pretty good. And especially I was a safety that played in the box too. And, so that should mean, and at least in my mind at the time, it was like, that should mean I can cover anyone, especially when I'm matched up against bigger guys, tight ends and people playing those sorts of roles. But like self-identified horrible man coverage, like that was a problem my whole career. And so that was kind of the first disconnect. I'm like, I'm faster than these guys. Why is it that I am getting burnt and, embarrassing myself in practices and in games? And it kind of goes hand in hand with one of the other things you mentioned, which is, of course, the mindset piece. Because when you are, I said self-identified, I realized this was a weakness. And that, once you realize it, it's very easy for that to get in your head and really, really start to snowball. So that was the second thing, is it was like, I can do anything in private. I feel like Superman when I'm training on my own. What about when it's training camp and all of the coaches are watching very meticulously? Or what about when you get in a big game and there's a lot on the line? And I found that I can't say I ever really cracked the code for myself. I'd say I'm a nervous athlete type. And so it felt like, how can I take what I can do metric wise when nobody's there and replicate that in these contexts where I really need to replicate it? And that's also sort of what prompted my journey into understanding the mind and the brain, and of course how they function in tandem.
Thank you for being vulnerable and talking about that, because I know that's a hard thing. I mean, I think I talk about my own type of shortfalls with playing baseball. I wasn't the biggest athlete. I wasn't the most talented by any means when it came to on the field. But I do think I could have stretched myself more. I think I was a little bit more of a nervous athlete when it came to just not being present, in the moment, and kind of not caring a little bit too much. Like, I don't care about what other people think. I think it's just a part of my personality kind of bled into how I was an athlete on the field. But so I wish I would have had a stronger mindset in college. And, I try to translate that even today in what we're doing with Calm Waves is trying not to go back to that in the performance side of things. What do people think of me? If I have my systems in place, if I'm doing these types of things, if I'm working, in these systems, they're, I'll be able to be better. And then using the technologies when I do feel anxiety or stressed in those ways. Okay, here are the things that I can do to get back into a peak performance kind of mindset, or in the flow state, or whatever you want to kind of call those types of things. So I think it's interesting with each kind of athlete of where they kind of go on their journey, because I think from a physical standpoint, you can work out and do all those different things. Once it comes to a game, especially if you're a safety or you're a quarterback or you're all these other things. I mean, you look at Tom Brady. Tom Brady wasn't the physical specimen that you'd think so, but he was really great between the ears and had that kind of competitive mindset to be able to do. So I think that's super interesting. And I love the kind of the idea that you're, just wanting to teach people too about, and kind of on your own kind of learning journey. I thought it was interesting. You're one of the few people that I've met that have like read some of our articles, that have, gone through a little bit of our stuff. What was the thing that when you kind of first ran into us that intrigued you the most?
A really good question. I think I was immediately drawn in by the video I saw with the device, the CES unit, because it's like we talked about before. It's like, what's that? Like, I've never seen that, especially as a neuroscience nerd. I was like, I've got to know, like, mechanism of action, all these things. But then when I kind of dug further and I think I was scrolling through the website and everything, I believe it was the article about sort of the lack of investment in neurological performance among even the highest levels of sports, which is so true. And that drew me in because it felt like I was like reading an article that I have written, but like in my head and never actually like put the pen to paper, because I've thought this. It's like, there's so much money dumped into this stuff. And I've seen it firsthand, amazing locker rooms, amazing facilities, new weight rooms when the old weight room is still perfectly functional and satisfactory, all kinds of money on nutrition. And not that any of this stuff isn't important, but it's like, what is driving it all? Every piece of improvement, whether we're talking about life improvement after sports, academic improvement, or winning games, less penalties, things like that, it's all coming from the brain. And it's like, yet all these, I don't know who exactly the decision makers are. I suppose it's the people at the top of the athletic administration, but they're being handed, they have all this money to invest and none of it's going into these sorts of resources. So I was reading the article, like just in complete agreement and wanting to see how I could be part of sort of pushing for change in this arena.
Why, from your standpoint, why do you think people don't invest in it?
It's a really good question. I think it comes back to the obsession, and we've talked about this before, you and I, with myself, where it's the obsession over making everything measurable. Because I think, like, yes, there's ways you can measure brain performance. I mean, you could, like I mentioned, penalties, you could chart sort of mental errors in game. And we've talked about metrics like HRV and things like that, charts. There's all kinds of things you can do, but they're not as immediately accessible and not as understood by the masses as like, who's the strongest guy in the room? Who's the biggest guy in the room? Who's the fastest? So I think for that reason, it's sort of a task of, it's a task of educating the people to kind of see the importance. And then also, aside from that, it's finding ways to demonstrate like the effectiveness of some of these things. And I've seen that with the kids that we work with in Cortex Flex as well, because the parents are so used to, when they're talking to anyone in this sort of sports training arena, they're used to being told, in so many weeks, you can expect this amount of improvement in speed or strength or whatever it might be. And I think it's just a lot more difficult, and maybe not even more difficult, but less commonly understood how to quantify improvements neurologically.
Tell me a little bit more, because I agree with you. I think we've talked about that before about, and I think there is ways you can measure it. I think there are tools out there that you can measure focus or brain activity. There's brain mapping. There's all those different things, but I think they all live kind of in silos a little bit, and they're more on the mental health side of things too. If you have a concussion, if somebody comes in, hey, someone has anxiety, they come in. So you've got these two different buckets. You've got like mental health, which is one bucket, and you have like mental performance. That's another bucket. But they both do the same thing. I mean, it's like, why does a person who just had surgery able to go to a physical therapist who's also working with somebody who's looking to the NFL combine? It's still performance in some way. It's still health in some way, but it's just, what are the people's goals? And so what you see, I think you see more, and one of the big things I think is that there's no one in the room that's responsible for it. Everyone is responsible in the college system from the neck down, and they might outsource somebody to do some, if someone gets a concussion, they might have a mental performance coach, but that's going to be, it's hard to do that at scale with, with it. So there's always those types of issues that I see kind of going. And so it's going to take an investment from an organization to go, okay, no one's ever done this before. We're going to have to learn how to do this, but we know this is important. We know this is either next, the next kind of cycle. You think about 30 years ago, weight training, that was seen as stupid. Why would you weight train? And then someone went, oh, maybe we should do this more. And then it was mental performance stuff, and Michael Jordan and all these guys were the first guys to ever do it. It wasn't at scale, and now it's a big scale thing. So I think we're going through that cycle of, hey, the brain is going to be kind of the next thing. It's just people don't know how to do it. Even on my dad's side, when he's doing stuff in the mental health space, I mean, my assumption going into this was that every mental health professional would have some sort of brain device to go along with their therapies. And it's just not the case. It's just not, people are still don't know what they don't know. And so that's a big thing that we have to do is from a Calm Wave standpoint, is educate people and say, yes, this does work. Yes, this is how to do it. This is how to, systematically go into it. Tell me.
That's amazing.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I think what you say about seeing the absence of this even on the practitioner side is very interesting. I've thought before that because you talk about health and performance and how they're heavily intertwined, and I very much agree. I think we almost at times, in considering especially athletics, we almost suffer from a disconnect between realms of so-called health and realms of so-called performance, where it's like you can be in a community of people who are extremely educated from like a psychiatric wellness or even like a neuroscience perspective, but in bringing that information to the performance world, it's like a foreign concept. It's like these conversations can't and won't happen almost ever, and vice versa. And I think I just thought we need a lot more crosstalk between realms of health and realms of performance, given that they're, as we say, so heavily intertwined.
Yeah, no, I think you're right on with that. It's just super interesting. I mean, like even if you look at mental health therapies, I'm not a therapist. I have a sister who's a therapist. I have a dad who's a therapist. My wife got her therapist degree, so I'm probably the least qualified person to say this, but it's just an observation that I have, and I think even my dad even talks about this is like, if you look at even therapy as mental health as a whole, it hasn't changed in the past 70 years. It's the same thing over the course of 70 years. Now, you might have something like EMDR and some other types of therapies that are in there, but it's a pretty old, Freudian kind of start stuff. Like, it's not like there's been some revolution in the mental health space. So that's where I think this incorporates. I think this is, what we've seen with using brain technologies to do and therapy at the same time has been unbelievable. The results, even just the fast results. So when you talk about a revolution of it or a disruption, I mean, that's where the brain technologies come into play, because you're healing the brain, the physical side and the mental side at the same time, rather than just going into one side. So I think that's where the performance side of it can start, where, guys who are concussed, anxiety, all those types of things, if they can do mental performance and do technologies at the same time, what does that do to their performance on the field? Or what does that do to help contextualize certain things that are happening in their life? So I think that's the big thing. Tell me more about what you're doing with Cortex. Tell me about that.
So Cortex Flex started very much for the reason I kind of articulated there earlier about noticing this disconnect between science and sport, because I felt like just personally in my own path, I had been so privileged to be mentored by people on the science side and get a great education in these things. And it felt like I was learning every day things where it was like, if I knew this and was able to apply this earlier in life in terms of my athletic journey, X or Y would have happened, whether it's success on the field or outside of that. And I just felt like, we need to find a way to facilitate this. So my first step was sort of to gather connections from both sides. So people I knew from playing Division I football, and then people from the science side and working with multiple labs, and working to build a platform where we can take information from subjects like neuroscience and make it palatable and interesting and actionable for young athletes to use for their purposes. And talking about this performance health relationship, one of the things that we always say, or kind of our motto really in educating the kids, is that performance today is health tomorrow. Because we believe that what we teach them through the lens of improving their performance in their sport right now will carry over to allow them to find better health outcomes throughout life. And ultimately, I mean, that was a kind of a motto that we learned through struggle, I'd say, because in the early phase, like the first kind of pilot group of kids we worked with, a lot of them from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, so shout out to Pittsburgh. It's like everything we taught or tried to teach was of no interest to anybody. We were probably sounded like a bunch of science nerds up there trying to talk to kids who just want to be a starter and, take their team to the championship game and ultimately play in college and all these things. So we learned very early, it's all got to be put through the lens of achievement and performance. But I mean, they go hand in hand so well that it's all the same qualities. So we take a very brain-focused approach to performance and health. And this involves teaching a lot of habit-based practices and sort of mental resilience, enhancing habits. And it's been awesome to work. I feel like the greatest way to learn is to teach. So it's really been amazing, kind of the first year of this effort, and really excited for where we're taking it going forward.
Yeah, I love that. I love that I think it's such a unknown sphere to go into, especially, there's no template out there for this, for how to teach somebody from a brain-based kind of standpoint. And I think that's been a fun thing for conversations back and forth of just try to go, all right, how do you take somebody progressively through a process like this? How do you take somebody, how do you build a really solid training program for kid, high school, or anybody else? But I love the fact that you say that it's, used for health later, because anytime you can teach a kid how to calm down or, get out of their fight and flight into their calm part of the brain, like that's just a lifelong lesson that, it's going to help them no matter what in life. So I love that about it, of teaching people at a young age to be present, and, being present not only like here, as I'm talking with you, but also, on the pickleball court or on the football field or wherever that is. Like, oh, I know how to do this. I know how to get locked in. People talk being, locked in, but what does that process look like? So I think that's such a great process to do. What's been one thing that I feel like you've learned maybe in the last like year that you've like light bulb, like this has been super cool for me that you've applied to your own studies? Because you're studying to be, where are you at? What are you at in school right now?
So I'm a neuroscience PhD student, but
Yeah.
ultimately, I mean, it's a long path. Ultimately, I want to work clinically. So I plan to get an MD at the conclusion of the PhD and kind of work between lab and clinic.
Love that. I love that application side of it, because sometimes you can get super theoretical and be like, oh, we could do this, but I like the practical approach. How does this work in real life? How can we get this into people's hands right now? I think there needs to be that theoretical side of it to push it forward, but there needs to be that, like, you can't just strap a bunch of stuff to someone's head and be like, oh yeah, this is going to help you. Like, okay, we got to make this smaller, or we got to make this simpler, or whatever it is, rather than, all those things. Okay, so PhD, let's go. What's something that you've learned or applied over the last year that's been like, oh, this has been game changing for me?
Do you mean from specifically the like research side, or
Yeah, like what you've kind of like, you've done your own research and you've been like, oh, I've applied this.
So I think it's simultaneously a discouraging and encouraging finding, which is that I guess it's how very multidimensional the brain's response to our surrounding stimuli is. Because a lot of what I'm working on uncovering in my own research is the brain's, or the adolescent brain in particular, its response to stress. And then on top of that, when the adolescent brain is stressed, what can we add sort of in conjunction with the stressor in order to prevent or reduce some of the long-term deficits that might result from the stressor. And you'd like to be able to say stress causes the brain to shift onto this certain trajectory. You know, maybe it's delayed prefrontal development or something like that. And then you'd be able to say, okay, well, we can rescue it by implementing an exercise protocol, or a infrared light is another thing I'm very interested in. So an infrared light based protocol, but it's not that simple. And then maybe I was naive forever thinking it would be anywhere close to that simple, but it's the complexity of it, I think, is my biggest takeaway so far, because I'm doing a lot of literature review. I'm like writing 2 reviews right now. So it's long hours of reading and sort of consolidating information. And that's the takeaway. It's that there's so many variables. That's why I say it's almost discouraging at times, because it's like, well, you have to take into account, you know, developmental timing. Where does the brain sit along its current trajectory? Take into account lifestyle factors and nutrition and all these different things. And it almost feels like, well, there's nothing to be found because it's so very unique to the context. But at the same time, the reason I say it's, you know, if I am in my glass half full kind of perspective, I'd say it's very encouraging, because what that means, this multidimensional model of the brain's response and its development, to me, it means that there are so many little switches in here. There are so many spots where we can go in and shift or optimize even this trajectory for how we want it to go or how we need it to go. And that's motivating, because from a neuroscience standpoint, we don't know enough yet to be quite so tailored in our ability to pick these things out. But that's the end game. And that's why I continue to show up to the lab every day, is I think that's something that we can continue to build on. And eventually downstream, this is something that we can apply clinically, of course.
Love it. You know, one of the thing that it makes me think about is kind of, and I've shared this with you before or just kind of shared it with you. I don't know if we've shared it on the podcast before. Putting together a book around kind of brain technologies and how they work. Again, this is much more of an observing type of a thing. Of, you know, I don't think there's a silver bullet. If you just do this one thing, it's going to fix everything. I think that's where it's these layers of technologies and techniques that help in different ways. Like I see it as kind of like a linear path type of a thing, where you may have somebody who, you know, does tapping and they're like, oh my gosh, this was a game changer for me. Or it was gratitude, or it was a CES unit, or it's direct neurofeedback, or any of these types of things where it's almost like because there's so many switches in a way. There's so many switches that it's like, okay, what's going to help that person the best, and how can they, you know, find their own path, or something they're just like, this is great for me. I'm all about tapping. This has just been the biggest thing for me. Or someone gets a CS unit, they're like, oh my gosh, this was great. So that's kind of my approach is thinking about it from almost like a layer standpoint of going, okay, here's your problem. Okay, what layers do I need to add to this so that I can get and be like, yeah, I'm good to go. Even, you know, you can take it from a sports kind of standpoint, is what pregame stuff do I need to do to get locked in? You know, that's where that habits building kind of things. But if it gets, you know, outside of that, a bigger thing of like, oh, I'm having sleep issues, I'm having these types of things. Now you've got those layers of going, okay, what's going to be the best thing for me to get to a point where you're like, okay, I'm good now. So that you don't have to go stuff beyond that. I think that's where, you get into medications and other kind of alternative medicines that people love to jump into, but they miss a lot of these other things before they get there. And that's kind of my theory, or my type of observation, is that it's sometimes missed. The brain type of therapies are jumped over. I have anxiety, I go to a therapist, I get my medication. Rather than, I have anxiety, I go to a therapist, they help me with some brain stuff or some brain therapy stuff. Hey, does that help me to get where I'm supposed to go? So that's kind of my theory. That's why I love about the theory, what you're doing, because you're looking at all of these different components and go, well, if it's this type of person and this type of thing, this is what's going to help them the most. It may not be the silver bullet, but at least it's a part of that plan for somebody.
Yeah, and I love the kind of the model you described there. I think more and more, kind of a tangent here, but it made me think of the fact that research itself and medicine is becoming increasingly sort of quantitative and really, I guess, AI driven, in that, we're moving toward an era of precision medicine where it really is, as you kind of described, we're going from point A to point B. So it's like you're here somewhere in whatever multidimensional space of brain activation, and we need to get to some other point. And I think any intervention or any stimuli we take in is a vector somewhere in this space where it will move us in some direction. Of course, I don't know that we have the precision to say exactly where it moves us, but this is what we're building toward, is being able to say, I need to go from A to B, and what vectors or what combination of vectors might take me there. And I think it's, as you said, there's a multiplicity of ways to move from A to B. And I think that's, again, encouraging. I mean, there's lots of ways, lots of methods, lots of switches, as you say, that allow us to attack these sorts of problems.
Yeah, I think it was like a toolkit of, and you got both sides of it too, from a going to peak performance brain side of things. I can never remember what the peak performance curve is called.
The Yerkes-Dodson curve.
Yerkes-Dodson thing. But you've got both sides of it. You've got, the side of it that's like focus. Okay, how do I get more focus? And then the other side of like anxiety too. So it's every day, it's a little bit different. I mean, you wake up in the morning, you're like, what side of the curve am I? Like,
yeah.
Am I, this morning for me I was not on the focus side. I'm like, okay, like I got to get here, but it's, so how do I not get over the top of it and stuff like that? So I think that's going in, and I think you can go into sports, and that's the easiest way because it's an event. It's, all right, I'm going to go play this. So I got to get up into this curve, as much as I can. My whole day is centered around this, one moment. And, for me, being a knowledge worker, it's not like that. It's like this, up and down, up and down, up and down. And you can argue that too, from a sports standpoint. It's up and down, up and down, up and down. If you're a golfer, it's, up and down for the shots. If you're a, football player, it's up and down for the plays and all that kind of stuff. So there is those types of things, but I'm talking like over a course of the day type of a thing. How do you say it up? So it's different. It's different lifestyle. It's like lifestyle brain performance, and then there's like sports brain performance. I don't know if that makes sense. I was kind of
that makes total sense. I think it's similar to what's talked about in health contexts about, like, we say, like, what's adaptive in one context may not be adaptive in another. And it's the same for performance. I mean, you can train your brain to associate to certain rhythms that might be absolute money in one context, in the professional world or in the athletic world, and then you step into another context and all of a sudden you're not able to meet the demands because your brain is not equipped for those sorts of intervals.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that's where the training kind of comes into play is just like stress responses. Where do you go under stress? There's so many phrases out there of like, under stress, you do what you practice the most. What is it? You don't rise to the occasion, you fall to your systems. Those are all things that I think that's why these, types of tools are helpful, because if it's like, okay, when this happens, not if this happens, it's when this happens. How can I overcome them and still be able to not wreck my day or wreck my play or wreck my game or wreck my at bat? That's really the whole goal of it, is making adjustments and being able to do that on the fly. And so that's why I think the brain performance types of things, because also the brain is wired to be stressed. As a human, we are wired to be stressed so we don't die. Like that, if there's rumblings in the forest, the person who goes, nah, I'm totally good with this, they died. Everyone else went, all right, I'm okay. So we're wired to do that. So it's not a bad thing. It's just going, okay, how do I contextualize this? How do I respond to this? Do I need to go on a little walk and then come back? Do I need to, step out of the batter's box and come back in? Do I need to, on the football field, it's, do I need to, go, okay, next play type of a thing. I love it. There's a guy Rick Sessinghaus, PGA Tour, a mental performance coach guy. Because I play golf, and people always say, there's golf shot, oh, that was a bad shot, or that was a good shot. And his big thing was, don't put a good or bad to the thing. Just kind of learn from it, what happened. And that's I think been a real big lesson for me, is because I'm so emotional, and sometimes of like, good, keep, if it's good, let's keep going type of a thing. If it's bad, oh, I'm so bad at this. But it's like, okay, if I can just, that was a good email. No, that was a good email. It was an email. Send it. What was the response? All right, this was the response. Cool. Like, let's keep going. Same thing with golf shot. All right, that went sideways. What can I learn from it? I need to not shank it, and it helps with the game. So I think that's applies to life, and also on the and on the court.
100% agreed.
But that's a skill to learn.
Of course.
And that's a brain thing to say, I'm not going to turn on my fight and flight. That I'm not going to go into my amygdala and be like, oh, that was a horrible shot now. And you're just not present in the moment. That just takes you out of being present in the moment. So it's kind of the biggest thing. So yeah, I know we got just a little bit more time yet left. I know we're I'd love to do another one of these.
Of course.
Because I'd love to talk more about kind of the thing we're working on, which is
very exciting.
The training program where we're going to be, Calm Waves is going to be helping out with doing our best to provide the resources and the training things that we've learned, along with Nate and his team. So we're going to do some collaboration, and I'm sure we're going to launch it at some point. But yeah, I'd love to jump on another podcast to be able to kind of talk about that.
That'd be awesome.
Anything to kind of close as we kind of close this? Any final thoughts?
No, I don't think so. I think just like our conversations that are off the podcast on Zoom, it lots to think about from our discussion. I think that's what's great about this stuff, is being able to connect and sort of develop these ideas together. So really appreciate you having me on. Yeah, no, we'll do this again. I know we're a little bit short today, but we will absolutely do this again. Where can people find Cortex? So we are Cortex Flex on Instagram. Our website is cortexflex.org. And we have a LinkedIn page set up. We had a TikTok, but that's a thing of the past. But yeah, I mean, lots to come from us. So if you're interested in this type of stuff that Calm Waves is doing, we are very much in a similar arena, just for, I think, a younger audience. So give us a look, and I think you'll enjoy what you see. Yep, absolutely. No, and we're going to be collaborating more. So I'm excited about the launch of doing it. And I love that you're, pursuing this, because I think the more people that are doing this, the more it's going to get into the hands of people that need it. 100%. Super excited about it. Well, thank you so much. And we'll end it here.